Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to continue our scholarly examination of the Bruce Jones written and edited sci-fi anthology, Alien Worlds. We're up to number 6, February 1984 issue, and we start off with a cover by Frank Brunner. Frank Brunner wasn't doing much in comics at this time. I think he was done with his Warp series for First Comics. I think he did like the first 10 issues. But maybe he was doing that concurrently sometime around this time. And then he did like one little graphic novel, and then he pretty much dropped out of comics again. Never to return. I don't know what he did after that. Probably more portfolios and fine art prints, because that's why he dropped out in the 70s. But pretty nice, very apropos for Alien Worlds, sci-fi, but this is some pretty blatant cheesecake here. Crazy outfit on this one. First story we got is Planet Perfect. Notice how the perfect is misspelled? We'll find out why. There's a reason. So this is pencils by Jim Sullivan. Jim Sullivan was this guy, he was in a few anthologies in the 80s. I don't think I ever saw him after that. Like, even in the 90s, he was already gone. And he obviously was like an acolyte of Al Williamson. He was almost like always trying to draw like Al Williamson, that beautiful EC sci-fi type stuff. And this is interesting. For inks, they got Arthur Suydam of Charlie and Flytrap fame. I guess you younger kids would know him as did a lot of Marvel Zombies covers. That kind of brought him back. Made him a superstar. But this is so interesting because you got Jim Sullivan, who was trying to be Al Williamson, and Arthur Suydam, who has such a Frazetta-ish or Frazetta-esque polish to his stuff. So it's almost like getting the Fleagle gang back together, half of it. And look at this. Look at that face there. That is just totally right out of a Fleagle gang comic from EC, with Frazetta inks. And look at the beautiful foliage here, like the sinuous tree branch dripping with moss, very organic and oozy, just like Frazetta would always draw. And then, of course, there's a mushroom here as the one nod to Al Williamson, because Al Williamson couldn't draw an alien planet without mushrooms on it. So this story, we see these two guys traveling through space, this old scientist and this young spaceman. And they're visiting the planet that the scientist created. He basically terraformed a planet. God knows how much that costs, but he made this planet to be perfect, to his exact specifications. It's almost like he wanted to make a paradise. And so I guess over the past few years, these robots have been terraforming the planet, and every now and then he'd visit it. But now it's finally done, and he's going to visit it and see his creation completed. And speaking of EC, this is seems very Wally Wood, all those doohickeys. Though Wood would have probably put twice as many, had all these relays and blinking lights and twice as many. But that reminds me of Wood here. So we're getting lots of EC influences in here. They land on the planet, and it is beautiful. It's a paradise. It's 70 degrees every day. There's not even predators on the planet, just cute little animals, cute critters. But then the scientist looks up and he sees a fly. And he says, "Oh no, a fly." And the young guy says, "So?" And he's like, "I didn't put them here. I didn't want them. I hate flies. It's all ruined. It's all ruined." And he realizes that he must have, when he visited the planet earlier to check on the progress, there must have been a fly in the ship that got out. And so he's just sitting there crying. It's all ruined. And the young guy talks him down. He says, "Come on, dude, you should be happy. This planet's pretty damn perfect. Okay, there's a few flies here. Come on, buck up." And the guy kind of says, "Yeah, I suppose you're right." And then all of a sudden, this woman comes out of the jungle. And look at her, just total Frazetta woman. Very va-va-boom. And the young guy says, "Now that's perfection. Look at those eyes, that hair, those lips, that..." And then all of a sudden, her tongue goes out like a frog, like a foot, and catches one of the flies buzzing around the spaceman's head. And gulp, eats it, swallows it. And then the last panel, the old scientist is just sobbing, just bereft. And he's like, the young guy's like, come on, I'll buy you a beer on the next planet. Sorry. Very silly. I mean, the whole premise is ridiculous. Just like, okay, so there's really hot women there with long tongues. I mean, that could be a plus. They might be quite skillful with these frog tongues. Who knows? But once again, look at that. That is so Frazetta, 50s Frazetta inks. Almost every panel in here is, an example of that Fleagle gang influence. Pretty damn nice art, but once again, Bruce Jones going for the silly gag. This next story is kind of interesting. I couldn't find the story behind the story on the internet. It's called The Test. This is obviously another one of those stories that was like unfinished, and Bruce Jones found it, some artwork, and wrote a script around it, filled in the word balloons where the spaces were. And so the art's by Roy G. Krenkel, but not these first two pages. The framing sequence is by Val Mayerick, the 70s artist we've talked about before. Roy Krenkel, you probably know, just a great all-around illustrator. Didn't actually do that many comics. He mostly did illustration for like books. But of course, he was part of the Fleagle gang. At EC Comics, he would help out Williamson on his gigs. And he was famous for drawing beautiful, ornate cities, like ancient cities. So we see this woman lounging on her yacht, and this guy comes up in a little dinghy, and he says, "Hey, would you do me a favor? I've got an extra scuba tank. Will you come down and verify that what I'm seeing, what I found down there is real? I feel like I must be going crazy because I found the most remarkable thing under the water." And this woman's totally game. She's like, "Sure, sounds exciting." So they go down the water, and they look what he found. This amazing underwater city, almost like Atlantis, And I think this is where the Roy Krenkel starts. What I wanted to mention, I don't know if you can tell, but the art's very odd in this, where I assume that Bruce Jones found these Krenkel pencils. Maybe before he died, he was working on a story and didn't finish it. So it looks kind of weird, unfinished, especially with these fancy colors all over it. But then it's got this, like, I don't know, it kind of looks shoddy, to be honest. It's not really finished. But it's interesting that Val Mayerick does the same style, so it matches. Because his page, of course, he could have drawn it any way he wanted, but he draws it the same way. I assume just pencils. Sometimes he presses a little harder on the pencil, so it's more of a line. But it's very sketchy and loose. It's not really a great effect with the colors over it. It's not that appealing. But, I assume that, it's Roy G. Krenkel. Getting to publish a lost story of his, I get it. It's important. So they go down to the city. And here's another thing. I assume it's, this was formatted for some kind of publication sideways. Some of the pages are sideways, some aren't. So we find out just through Bruce Jones' dialogue. Bruce Jones is good at that. Like, you find out what the person's kind of like. And we realize that this woman's kind of like kind of a right-wing, I don't know if paranoid's the word, but, like kind of like a American type, patriot type. Because all she could think about is like, oh my God, this is a Russian missile silo. And the guy's like, I don't think a Russian missile silo would have these Baroque architectural flourishes, like, that doesn't really make sense. So then they go inside the city, and these fishmen attack the inhabitants of the city. They grab them and take them to the king. So this is what I think, another theory of mine. So this first page was, actually, I don't know why. Some of these are sideways. But this page kind of looks like it was cut up to me. Like maybe it was sideways. 'Cause the way these panels cut into these other panels, kind of awkwardly. I think Krenkel was a better storyteller than that. That's kind of a weird panel progression. So maybe he did some cut and paste on these panels. I don't know. Sideways again. I'll make sure you can see it. There you go. So the king is basically telling them that we wanted to communicate with you since you're the dominant species. To be honest, we're not that impressed with your civilization. We've seen much killing, much tragedy, much waste. We can't really trust you, humans. You know, you haven't really given us reason to trust you. But now that you're like playing with nuclear armaments, this could affect us. So we're intervening after all this time. We've been hiding from you guys, but we want to start an open line of communications because this isn't kosher. You guys playing around with nuclear bombs and shit. Okay, here's something else you might notice. Look at these insane word balloons. If you remember, Bruce Jones doesn't even like word balloons. He almost always does captions, even when it's someone's thoughts. Instead of a thought balloon, he'll put in the caption. So this is why maybe this story isn't the best, because these balloons were placed here. So he had to fill them up, or there'd just be white art. You know, there'd be these weird spaces. So look at this overwriting here. And he's really not saying anything new. He's just kind of reiterating the same thing. Yeah, you humans, we don't trust you. Once again, look at that balloon. That's a fat balloon. So he basically says, we set up a test. We're going to let you guys go. If you keep silent about the whereabouts of our city for like, I think a week or something, or 3 days. If no move's been made against us in that time, we'll consider your race worthy of future negotiations. If not, we will totally destroy your world, because apparently they're way more technologically advanced than we are. Once again, through the dialogue, something's up with this woman. It is a little heavy-handed. She's obviously a terrible liar, because she is stuttering every time she says, oh yeah, we want peace too. Oh, of course we agree to your terms. But she's like going, I don't think anyone's that bad a liar. Look at this insane, another crazy balloon. But I bet that was blocked out by the original writer, so Bruce Jones kind of had to fill it up. Just my theory, but yeah, Bruce Jones never does this shit. So, of course, they agreed to his terms. And the dude seems pretty earnest. He's like, wow, this is exciting. Yeah, well, definitely, I'm going to keep silent and we'll earn their trust. And this could usher in a new era of peace in the whole world. As soon as they're out of earshot, though, the woman's all like, she's like, screw that. As soon as we get to my yacht, I'm going straight to the president. And hopefully we can get the drop on them. Hopefully they'll drop a nuke on the whole city before they can kill us, kill the surface world. And the guy's like, but we promised. She's like, you promised. So she's this total like warmonger. And he says, you lied to them. She's like, of course. That's how the strong survive. That's how America became the place it is today. That's why we'll always win. And she says, we've got to alert the authorities now before the Russians discover the city. And as he pulls off a mask, the dude says, no, Amanda, I'm afraid I can't let you do that. And it's one of the fish people. The whole thing was a test. And once again, humans have failed, as we usually do. Stupid humans. Oh, yeah, this last page is Val Myrick, by the way. So I think he does just the first and last pages. And I guess it's kind of nice seeing Ward Krenkel's last story, but it's not very good. The sad thing is even he's known for his beautiful cities. And look at this first thing we see of the city. That is not very impressive. That's nothing. It's not very good. So I don't know, maybe he was very old at the time, his abilities had waned. Next, we got Pride of the Fleet. This is the story that the cover depicts a scene from. So the pencils in this are by Frank Brunner. And this is interesting. The inks are by Mike Mignola. So this is a young Mike Mignola. Definitely you'd never guess it was him. He obviously didn't have the style that we know and love from Mignola at that point. He was just doing stuff for Marvel, like, Rocket Raccoon and Alpha Flight and stuff like that. And mostly just inking. But it's pretty interesting inking. Kind of reminds me of like Don Lomax or something, or I don't know. It's pretty appealing. So there's a third person omniscient narrator telling us everything this woman's thinking. This is another good Bruce Jones character piece. The story's kind of wonky. You'll see in a second. It's a really weird twist ending. But through all these pages, we really get a sense of this woman's character. Definitely a well-rounded character. Because it's not heavy-handed. It's, she obviously is very pleased with herself. She's kind of vain. She's going through the jungle. She's on a manhunt for this guy who stole something from Colony 6, where she's like a soldier. And she's an authority figure. And I guess her commander said, you got to take this thing, the Califax, right there. You'll need it on this mission. And the reason why she doesn't like it, because she's an amazing swordswoman and she's cocky. So she's just like, I've never needed anything more than my sword before. I've won every battle. Why the hell do I need this thing? But mainly because it kind of disfigures her newly designed combat uniform. The sleek line of her fashion is kind of ruined by it. So she's kind of vain, very sure of herself. Seems like she is quite formidable. So like, it's not like she's full of shit. Like maybe she has a right to be proud of herself. Here's some nice stuff though. Nice jungle planet, crazy flora and fauna. Nice stuff. And it looks like a lot of Mignola. Because I've never seen Frank Brunner ink like this. And Bruce Jones has to throw in some little suggestive, sauciness. Look at her fondling her hilt, because she loves her sword. It's like her best friend. And it's just like, come on, Bruce Jones. Really? So she's going through the jungle. Then she has a flashback to her debriefing for the mission. And there's actually a reason why she wears this crazy outfit. I mean, it's not a great reason, but this is not the normal uniform of these soldiers in the city. But she's so good at what she does. She's allowed to wear whatever she wants. People complain, but she's like, what are you going to do, fire me? And, but strangely enough, she actually has this uniform that she designed herself because I guess in this future, the Edgar Rice Burroughs books have just come back into print and she's a fan. She's trying to look like Deja Thoris. And her officer's just kind of like, you really wear that uniform around the base? Are you sure that's a good idea? And she says, I prefer to, and she says, I think he tells her to sit. And she says, I prefer to stand. Thank you, sir. And she thinks to herself, it shows me off better. So she is very vain. And she knows how beautiful she is, basically. She is, gorgeous. Her name's Sheffield, by the way. So I guess now we're finding out, this guy went AWOL with this very expensive and security sensitive object. It was one of two. And she has to get it back. She has to find this guy and get it back. Look at her, she's just posing. So she's going through the jungle. This is kind of a weird interlude because it has really nothing to do with the story. except to maybe show off her abilities, just so we understand why she's so cocky. But she meets this guy in the woods. Kind of looks like Errol Flynn, very handsome guy. And she says, "What's your business here?" She realizes that he's not from Colony 6. And Colony 6 has sole privilege to this planet. So she's like, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "Oh, I'm hunting Rhunk." Rhunk is this very fierce creature on the planet. She says, "That's against the law." So basically it's like, it's on. She's like, "En garde. I'm taking you in." And they start this really epic battle. And pretty soon they both realize that she is way better than him. She's just toying with him. She really is an amazing swordswoman. He can't get a beat on her. She's dancing around him like Muhammad Ali. She's just like, it's child's play to her. And then she gets behind him, cuts off his belt, and slits his pants so they fall down to his ankles. And he trips. And he's terrified. She's like, "Please don't kill me." And this is kind of interesting for Bruce Jones. Look, he's got some beefcake in here. A lot of his comics are full of cheesecake. But this is a pretty hot beefcake. Look, this guy's wearing a little Speedo. Totally built like a brick shithouse, this guy. And she threatens to chop off his manhood, but she doesn't. She just leaves him there, terrified and naked in the woods. We can see some of the old Frank Brunner in panels like that. I've said this before, though, because we just recently looked at some Frank Brunner. It's like, kind of makes me sad how some of these artists, like, in the mid-'70s, Frank Brunner was the best. Like, in my book, he's up there with Neil Adams and all those great artists. As far as straight cartooning, I mean, guys like Bernie Wrightson and Mike Cluta, they're in a whole other level of originality and, their art. But as far as just doing, like, really good straight comic artwork, Frank Brunner was so good. His Doctor Stranges are amazing. Left comics to do portfolios, art prints. 80s, he came back for a little while. And just so not as good. It's kind of a shame. Look at some of this crazy inking from Mignola here. It almost looks like that way Charles Crumb, that weird style he developed. Kind of roly-poly, cylindrical, curvy shading. Very odd. That's kind of weird too. So, sorry, we're seeing another flashback here. She's finding out more about the mission. It turns out the guy she's got to find, his name's Leakwood. And she was pals with him. Not they weren't romantic or anything. She kind of liked hanging out with him. He's a very curious guy. She says he seemed almost asexual. I kind of liked hanging out with him because he never hit on me. And most guys are always trying to get me in the sack. So it was kind of nice having a guy I could just chat with and go to see a movie and not worry about that crap. So he says, "Yeah, well, you got to find him. You got to get that thing he stole." And she's like, "Well, what is it? How am I going to find it if you don't tell me what it is? How am I going to know what it is?" And he says, "I can't tell you. It's like under the highest security clearance." So she's like, "Oh, well." But he says it's one of two. So now she's in the jungle outside Colony 6. And apparently barely anyone goes out to the jungle. This planet's really dangerous. Mainly because the Rhunk, that creature we talked about earlier. And we just kind of see these long pages of her going through the jungle, and we just kind of see inside of her head with the omniscient narrator. And also a chance to show off her uniform more at her body, because Bruce Jones likes that. Just to show how weird this planet is, this bird lands on a tree and the tree eats it. It's like a giant Venus flytrap tree. So she's on the trail of Leakwood, and all of a sudden she sees a Rhunk coming out of the ground. I think maybe they sleep under mud. And she's like terrified. She realizes that her sword is not going to cut it. Because the reason they gave her that Caulifax, basically her captain had to foist it on her. He said, "No, you're taking this thing with you. It's the only thing that'll protect you from a Rhunk." And the whole time she was like, "Yeah, I don't need this shit. My sword is... I could kill that thing with my sword, I'm sure. I've never had a problem before." She sees it and she's like, oh shit, I'm glad I don't just have my sword. She's pretty terrified. We see another flashback, find out about the Rhunk. This thing is like the fiercest thing in the galaxy. Its hide is almost like a titanium. There's tests where they dropped missiles on this thing and they survive. So these things are just nothing. Basically, they're unkillable. Nobody's ever killed one. So it turns out that Rhunks also are vicious. Any other creature they see, they attack, except for another Rhunk. It's the only thing they won't attack is another Rhunk. So now we're back to the present. She's watching this Rhunk just terrified. And she slips and falls down this cliff right next to the Rhunk. Her Califax is a few feet away. So she's only got a few seconds. The Rhunk is approaching her. And she's panicking and the thing won't work. And the Rhunk seems incredibly interested in her. Its nostrils are flaring. The muscles were riding in sensuous rhythm along its shoulders, tentacles twitching in anticipation. She finally remembers that there's a safety, so she takes it off and she turns the Califax on. And we see this kind of groovy psychedelic transformation thing. Somehow it takes off her clothes. But it turns her into a Rhunk. And so now she's facing off against the Rhunk, who's not going to kill her anymore, but he's still very interested in her. She says his nostrils are still flaring. And the Rhunk steps on her Califax and crushes it. So she's stuck as a Rhunk forever, because that was the only thing that could turn her back. And then it mounts her and starts mating with her, wrapping its tentacles around her. And she figures out what happened. She said the Califax couldn't quite disguise the familiar personality behind the eyes, the quiet, introverted, but highly imaginative brain. And in that instant, she knew exactly why Leakwood had led her this merry chase. It's Leakwood, so he had the other Califax. That's what it turned out it was. And he turned himself into a Rhunk, and I guess just assumed she would too, to survive. And it says, if he couldn't have her one way, he'd have her another. And then it's a pretty sad ending, especially for this woman who was so vain and proud of her looks. It says, she'd miss her friends, of course, and life at the colony, but most of all, she'd miss her sword, even with the highly sensitive tentacles at her command. It was difficult to be as graceful as Deja Thoris. So she's stuck as this Rhunk mate for the rest of her life. Once again, guys, I'm sorry, that's a pretty dopey story. And especially because it doesn't really make sense, even with character stuff. Like, Leakwood knew her as a man. If he really wanted her that bad, he would have at least made a pass at her and tried to sleep with her when they were humans. But supposedly he went through this whole elaborate thing and becomes a Rhunk, which probably isn't fun. For the rest of his life, he's a Rhunk too. And whatever. But I gotta say, it's an interesting story just because how weird it is. It's also weirdly paced. I don't know if you guys noticed how, like, for example, this whole sequence with the good-looking guy. Nothing to do with the plot, just a little interlude. The way it keeps flashing back to give us a little bit more of the story, it's not really for dramatic purpose. It's not necessary. And they just keep flashing back to that guy. So it's a kind of a meandering story. It's kind of odd. But because of that, it's, different than your average formula. So I've kind of found it very interesting, this story. I was just like, where's this heading? I can't even fathom. And believe me, that ending, I did not see that coming. And this is like something from an underground comic or something. This is crazy. That's the twist ending. Something EC Comics never could have done. But the art's pretty nice, even though I was bemoaning the fact that Frank Brunner doesn't draw as good as he used to. But it's still pretty nice, especially with the Mignola inks. Very interesting inks. So that's it for this issue of Alien Worlds. I hope you enjoyed it. I feel a little bad that, I keep talking about how great Bruce Jones is. And the thing is weird. He is. He can be amazing. He has the ability. And I haven't read these in 30 years. And I got to say, I'm up to issue 6. And there's a lot of silly stories in these. I forgot. So I hope you don't think I've led you astray on purpose or anything. I'm just as surprised. But I know Bruce Jones has it in him. I've seen it. We've seen it on the channel. Some of these stories are brilliant. But some of them are just kind of ridiculous. And even though they're well written, within the structure of some silly story, he still has great characters, great interior monologues, and he's got the chops. But he just loves those twist endings, the silly twist endings. He's kind of married to them. So hopefully next issue will be better. Frankly, I can't wait to check it out in a week or two. I really hope some of the silliness is behind us. But I guess that's it. And I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.